Okay, let's get started this painting demo. So first thing I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna do a little bit of sketching, all right? Now it's kind of important to sketch out your stuff when you paint. A lot of painters like to just go in painting. That's fine actually, but I think drawing is really important too. A lot of times we need to draw with paint also. Excuse me. Also draw with paint a lot. So what they'll do is like they'll just sketch things out in paint, but drawing is important, is what I'm saying. Now, if you're having trouble doing the light side and dark side, what I recommend you to do is to make a division. So what I did was I kind of sketched it. It's kind of really hard to see. Okay, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna press harder. It's like barely noticeable. But what I'm doing is I'm dividing everything by light side versus cool side. I mean dark side. So this side's gonna be in shadow. And then this side's gonna be in light over there. And then I also sketched out my my cast shadow too. Kind of like this. And then if it helps to draw a highlight in, I would draw it too. Anything that helps to have drawn in, draw in. That's the important part. Like if you don't know how to like do it with paint, do it with pencil and then paint over your pencil. All right. Now this on the bottom over here, you have to recreate this in order to do this. All right. You're going to be using all of the paints that you've used on the bottom over here. That's what it's for. So once you've made all of these, you should know how to make all the values in there. So I'm gonna get started. I'm gonna be using my round brush for this. Okay, and here's how it would start is I already have my my black and white over here. They're dry now, but I can still use them at least, so that's nice. So first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna find my darkest dark and lightest light. Okay, so I know my lightest light is here, and I know my darkest dark is probably gonna be down here in the shadows. So what I'm going to do is I'm gonna establish that first. All right, I always establish my darkest dark and lightest light first, no matter what. I ignore every rule that any teacher has ever given me just to do that first. And it's because then after I do that, I follow all the rules for the most part. And the reason is because when you have your darkest dark and lightest light, like a lot of times when we paint, you always want to start with the background when you paint first, okay? Most of the time, standardly. Do you always do it? No. There's times where you have to break the rules. That's just how everything is, especially with art. Like there's times where like you can't follow the stuff, and sometimes it's rare, sometimes it's common. It depends on where you are. But most of the time, you're going to be working from background to foreground. And it's because you can layer the mistakes you've made on top when you work background first. So if you accidentally get into your circle like this, then or your sphere, then later we can just cover it up. But I'm going to establish my darkest dark first. And it's kind of watery, so I want to go back. And my lightest light is going to be up there. Now that I kind of have that established, what I can do is I can start finding out how dark does the background need to be compared to my darkest dark and my lightest light. So what I'm going to do... Ooh, okay. I mean, my white is a little bit pink, but no, you know what? I'm gonna change it. I don't want to take risks. I'll do that a lot with paint, just like a heads up. Like I don't like to waste paint, so I'll try to like I'll try to reuse some of the old paint for something. But I'll be honest, it's a bad habit, and it sometimes works. But if you're not proper with your color mixing, it could be a really big waste of time. So sometimes it's just better to just, because you can kind of, it's hard to tell, but yeah, you can see it's kind of pinkish, right? So I don't want my highlights to be pink. I want them to be a pure white. And like, you know, I'm willing to like give up some paint just to do that. So I'm gonna start working on my background. So I'm gonna grab some of that white. I'm gonna grab some of that black. I'm gonna start trying to find a value that matches my background. There we go. This is kind of close. And now that I kind of have it close, I can make a bigger amount of it. Actually, this might be the time that I show y'all how to mix with the palette knife. Okay, so I hate mixing with the palette knife, but I'm gonna teach y'all how to do it because some of y'all might really like it. So I'm gonna grab my palette knife, kind of like this, and what I'm going to do is I've already taken the colors. I'll take more just because. So you'll take it off kind of like this, and what you want to do is you just want to kind of scrape it on where you want it to be. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the back, and then I'm just gonna mix it. Kind of like this. And palette knife can also be used for painting too. A lot of times people like, what is it? If they want to make like dirt textures, they'll do this. And it makes like really nice dirt mountain textures. I actually really rarely palette knife paint though. And it's because it costs a lot of money. Like you got to get a bunch of paint. You got to put it on there, and then like it's literally like loading your knife up with like paint. And like you just like slab it on, and it's like the biggest slab of paint ever. So it does use a lot of paint, and also it's not really an acrylic technique, it's a oil painting technique, but people use it a lot to mix acrylic paints too. So that's kind of how I would do it, kind of like this. But I really don't like mixing with this because I feel like I have less control over like how I want to mix my paints. That's just me though. For some people, they love it. Like I said, like my assistant like was like in love with it. She actually like yelled at me for not doing it that way too. She was like, "How come you're not doing it like that?" I'm just like, I just don't want to. I'm using like my brushes too, so you know it's not like I'm ruining anyone else's stuff. So now that I made a good amount, I'm gonna start blocking in my background, okay? And this is pretty important to do. I always block in. Okay, and what is blocking in? Who knows what blocking in means? You know, right?
Yeah.
What is it, Haley?
You like put down a solid amount of color and then you can kind of later on add color on top of it or blend it out depending on the...
I love that. That was pretty much more than what I was going to say actually. But yeah, you want to lay down a solid color, usually a general value and a general temperature. So if it's like a general red in that area and it's like a certain type of red, like it's a certain type of dark red that's consisting most of it, instead of adding in the shadows and lights, you block it in one solid color first, so that as Haley said, so later you can layer on your shadows and your lights and all those other details. So that's what I'm going to do. Now, a lot of times in painting, people will block in a whole element as one color. I like to do this. I like to block in 1 to 2. So what I mean by 1 to 2 is if I block in a sphere, sometimes depending on the sphere, most of the time I wouldn't just block in the whole sphere one tone. I would block in the shadow one tone, and I'll also block in the lights as one tone too. And what that does is it just helps me work. It just helps me work with it a little bit easier. I shouldn't have painted on this. I should have painted on my sketchbook. I'm gonna do the next one in my sketchbook though. I highly recommend y'all for these ones. You can do them on this paper, but this paper sucks. Unless you like printed it on like really nice paper, but regardless, like most printer paper is not going to be like that good for this. So just keep that in mind. Sorry, what? Oh, it's 11? Oh, okay, okay. Here's what we'll do. Why don't we all take a 10-minute break? Yeah, so let's come back at 11:10. So I'm just gonna finish blocking in my background, but feel free to take a break. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna take this time to transfer. whoops. Hey, how are you? Good? Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Yeah, see you later, yeah? Okay, so I'm going to go over this sphere a little bit for like for maybe about like 15 minutes, and then I'm going to show you how to clean up, and we're going to call it a day. Yeah. So, and then could someone just remind me at maybe like 11:25 to start showing y'all how to clean up? I'm gonna set what is it, timers next time on my phone. Yeah, I apologize. It's just taped up right now. But what I'm going to start doing, I'm going to start blocking in. So like I said, I like to block in the shadow and the light. Okay, so when I block in the shadow and the light, what I do is I kind of choose the general tone, or actually I choose kind of the general dark tone. So over here, I chosen this dark over here, like that kind of band over here. Right before it hits the reflective light, like that's kind of where I'm kind of blocking in right now. And I can also block in my my cast shadow, and it's gonna be blocked in much darker. And my darkest dark also needs to be pushed a little bit. It's not dark enough, and it's because it's too watery. And then let's start blocking in that shadow too. So I'm gonna grab another gray. And then something really important I want y'all to do over the next week also is if you haven't checked titanium all semester, you should check it this week and make sure that I graded all of your stuff right. Yeah, just double check, make sure. Every time I grade, like, you know, I do double check all the stuff I've inputted, you know. I don't go back to the old ones or anything like that. Okay, because I don't have the sheets anymore, but go back and double check to see if I did them right. All right, there are always mistakes. It's happened a couple times. Just make sure that you're always checking your grades too, and also be aware what your grade is. So I showed y'all how to like do weighted grades, right? If you don't know what your grade is and you want to know, make sure you send me an email. I can send you your grade too if you're not sure how to calculate it still. But please make sure. Because once the summer starts and you want me to change grades, it's yeah, it's not it most likely not gonna happen. So. I would do it like really as early as possible. Find a mistake. Also might not be here for some time in the summer, so you know, just keep that in mind. It'll be really hard to get a hold of me probably. So yeah, please double check your grade. It would mean a lot to me. All right. So now I'm going to start blocking in the top section over here. Now, I'm not going to block it in white, okay? Because to be honest with y'all, a lot of people like to start off lighter. I like to start off darker. I always really enjoy pushing my lights on top of the dark. So what I'm going to do is, instead of using the white, I'm going to use this gray over here in order to block things in with. So I'm going to make a super light gray. It has to be dark enough so that we could tell it's a gray though. And then what I'm going to do actually, now instead of blocking it in, here's what I kind of did, is I actually kind of drew out my highlight space. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start blending right away to that. And it's nice to have a lot of water, not a lot, I mean, it's nice to have water to wet your paint with because this paint dries really fast. Acrylic paint is actually a newer paint. It's only been around, I think it's been around less than 100 years. Believe it or not. Oil paint is old though. Oil paint's super old. But yeah, acrylic paint's been around for a while. So, I mean, acrylic paint hasn't been around for that long, sorry. Sorry, when I paint and stuff and I draw, I get kind of scattered. But so it's a newer paint. It dries a lot faster than oil paints do. Oil paints can take like a week sometimes, depending on how much you've layered. If you go like impasto is when you make your paint so thick it looks 3D. It could also take a really long time for that to dry. So right now what I'm doing is I'm like kind of blending a little bit to my shadow, and I'm gonna do a really quick blending tutorial before, definitely before the day ends. So I'm just gonna do it right after this. Now what I'm gonna do is I can go back and clean up my shade. Oh, that's too dark. So kind of like that at first, okay? So it's like kind of mildly blended. There's still a lot of like blending I need to do. Now, here's how I would blend, all right? Now, I stated earlier, a lot of people like to start off light and then they go to dark. I like to do the opposite, especially with thick paints. If I'm doing watercolor, it's a totally different story. Watercolor, you always should start off light. If you start off dark, you must have like some really crazy technique I've never seen before, or I don't know, maybe like watercolor is so easy for you, you need a challenge now. So you start off dark. But here's how I like to blend my paints, acrylic paints at least, is kind of like this. So there's two ways that I'm going to teach you all how to blend. The first way is how I would blend. The second way is if you're having a lot of trouble blending, do it the second way. So I'm going to use two extremes. I'm going to start with the black, okay? So I'm going to blend a white into the black, all right? So I have my black down kind of like this. And I want my white, but here's the thing. I don't want my white. I want my white to be a pure white on the left side, gradually turning into there. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put my white on the other side. I'm not going to touch any of my black first. Kind of like this. Oh, I mean, oh man, y'all can't even see it. I forgot. All right, I'm going to grab red. So there, we have red now. All right, y'all can see that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to blend it into the black, okay? And here's how it's going to work. I'm going to slowly go towards the black without touching it. And I want to make sure that I don't touch it. I make sure that all of this is red. Then I'm going to touch the black. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the black kind of back like that. All right, so you're kind of moving paint into each other. That's how you'll be blending. All right. Oh. Okay. I'm gonna make a bigger bar so it's a bit easier to see the blend. So we can slowly see the red turn into like this like dark color over there on the right. Here's the second way I would blend it. If you're having a lot of trouble blending, like you just can't get it down for some reason and it's just like destroying you, here's what I would do. Grab the colors that you want. So I'm going to use a phthalo blue for this. Put them next to each other. It's like Pepsi. And then here's what I would do. Once they're next to each other, clean your brush, dry your brush. Okay, don't have a wet brush for this. It's okay to have a wet brush sometimes, but a damp brush is actually the best to have. Not a super dry brush, but a damp one. And then what I would do is I would just feather the in-between, kind of like that. And then clean it again, dry it again, feather this in-between. Does that make sense? Yeah, those are the two methods that I would try to blend with. All right, in order to get like a really, really nice blend. It does matter with your application of paint though. Like I should have probably added more paint on the bottom over here because that part wasn't really mixing. Okay. So just gonna continue the sphere just a little bit more. Now, you always, so right now I want to try to blend my lights into my core shadow, and I also want to add my reflective light. But what I need to do is I need to make sure that I have wet paint. All right, you can only blend paint while it's still wet. You can't blend it when it dries. All right, so just keep that in mind, okay? Now, when I put paint on top of dry paper, it's called wet on top of dry, okay? When I put wet paint on top of wet paint, it's called wet on wet. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm gonna make a lighter version of this gray. So over here, it's a lighter version, and I'm gonna do a wet on wet application. So right now, what I'm going to do is I'm just gonna add, so I'm gonna add this light gray on top of this dark gray while it's still wet. And what's going to happen is they're going to blend a little bit together because they are still wet. And actually, I have a very serious issue with mine right now. No, my darkest dark is not my darkest dark anymore. I might have smudged it out. But you see now? Oh, okay, it's like barely seeable on y'all's. See if I can push it a little bit for the camera. And something that I find a lot better to do is make sure you're moving your arm around all the time. Like I try drawing stuff with my wrist sometimes, like especially if it's so small, and it's really hard to just draw with your wrist sometimes. So it's always a good idea to make sure you're positioning your arm in the best place you can to make your strokes. I'm gonna start pushing my darkest dark again, which I'm actually out of. But watch, once I get my darkest dark in again, it's gonna pop out so much. Okay, actually, I don't know if it made a difference on y'all's screen. On mine, it made like a huge difference. It kind of looks the same on the on the projector. But it is important, like over here, like this was starting to become too light. It was starting to match this. So I added like this black on the bottom over here to kind of push that. Okay. And I know like we're coming pretty close to having to go, so I'm gonna wrap this up. And then I'm gonna show y'all how to clean up. And we'll call it a day. Anyone have any questions about mixing paint or any of that stuff today? No, we're all good. Okay. And then okay, so I'm gonna leave this to dry a little bit after I clean up this edge. Just darken this edge a little too. And my core shadow's starting to go away. So like I said, there's a lot of reapplication a lot of times. Like you're gonna like accidentally move stuff and things like that. You're gonna accidentally blend it to things you don't want. But it's the nice thing about paint is once it's dry, you could fix it. A lot of my little kid students, whenever they mess up their painting, they get so sad. They're just like, man, you know, how do I fix it? Like, I can't cover it. I'm like, well, you can. You can totally cover it. It's paint. Okay, this part I would wait to dry before doing the highlight. But that's pretty much like all I have for this spear for today. I'll be working on the other ones on Thursday. Now I'm gonna kind of go over really quickly how I want y'all to kind of handle cleanup, okay? And cleanup has to be like the way like I show you all how to do it. Otherwise, like I'll get in big trouble. So really quickly, okay? These like cups. Like you can dump the water in the sink outside, all right? So the sink out there, that's like I said, that's where you'll be getting all your water. That's where you'll be dumping the water and all that stuff, okay? Now, this over here, here's what you can do, all right? Let's just say you like these colors. You want to keep these colors, all right? If you have a, can I borrow your sponge actually over there? Thanks, Sean. Oh, awesome. So if you have this over here, all right, what you could do is you could soak your sponge and then, what is it, squeeze it out so it's dry, okay, so it's kind of damp. And then what you want to do is you want to set your sponge under this, and then you'll set this on top, and it'll keep it wet, all right? If you have a spray bottle, you could spray it and then cap it too, all right? But that's what the, thanks so much. And that's what the cap is for, all right? Now the sponge is machine washable. Okay, you can throw it in the washing machine, you can throw it in the dryer, it should be fine. I don't dry it though, just in case. So I just kind of leave it out to air dry. But just keep in mind, don't leave your sponge in there for more than like 2 days. Otherwise, when you open it, it's gonna be kind of furry. And it's gonna make you sick. So just be mindful. I don't want any mold to grow anywhere. But that's really handy to have. So I want to save this for Thursday. Realistically, these are gonna dry. These really flat ones. They're gonna dry unless I have the sponge or a spray. But I'm gonna save them. Now let's just say I don't want to save it. Okay. So what you would do? Actually, you know what? Now that I look at this, I actually don't want it. So let's just say I don't want to save it, okay? You're going to fold it up, all right? Please fold it up. And then into the trash. And this is for acrylics, and it's only for this, okay? If you're doing oil painting in a different class, you have to put away oil paints a very specific way. Like you shouldn't be dumping any of the oil stuff into the sink, things like that. Acrylic is super easy to clean up. So that's pretty much all you gotta do for cleanup, and then all you do afterwards is just cap your stuff, things like that. Now, in terms of your brushes, here's what you wanna do, okay? Now, I don't know if I brought it today. Okay, no, I didn't. Okay, so you can buy brush cleaner at Blick. It's not necessary. I think you can buy it at our store too. It's not necessary though. I bought a brush cleaner and I almost never use it unless like it's a big brush. Oh, you have it. Awesome. It's really handy to have though. It's really. Can I actually show that to everyone? Thanks. This is the exact brand I would get. This is called the Masters Brush Cleaner and Preserver, and it comes like this. And the way it works is when you open it up, you kind of have like this bar over here, and it kind of looks like bombing or something like that. And basically all you would do is you wet your brush a little bit, and then you kind of swirl it around, kind of like this. You swirl it around in there, and bubbles should start forming, and then you just rinse it off. And when you rinse it off, make sure to get, you can't like go in and like pick out every hair in there, you know, but make sure you are like gently getting the insides at the same time, because that's where most of the paint will kind of stay. Also to keep in mind, thanks so much, Sean. If you have, don't ever use the same brushes you use for watercolor. Don't ever use other brushes that you use other paints with watercolor. So if you're a watercolor artist, don't use these for watercolor. You'll ruin your watercolor painting. All acrylic brushes will never be cleaned 100%. They'll eventually break your brush. It's just the honest truth. So like your brush cleaner will just preserve it for longer, but there's always stuff that's gonna be stuck in there that you can't reach. And what's gonna happen is when you watercolor and you lay down that watercolor, that texture will appear too. Does that make sense? So like if you have like a clunk of paint in there and you put your watercolor, the clunk of paint will also make marks as you mark. So only use these brushes for thick paints like gouache, acrylics, oils, things like that. Okay? Do you have any questions? No? Awesome. So other than that, that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. And why don't we all get started cleaning up? Yeah. Now every week from now on, we are going to get started cleaning up. Like if not around 11:20 to 11:25. Okay, it'll take around 15 minutes to clean up all of our stuff. We have to line up for the sink and things like that. Don't go to the restroom to wash your stuff, okay? Like I think that's like a rule to not do. So just like keep that in mind. All right. But other than that, if you have any questions, let me know, and feel free to take images up here. And if you haven't turned in any of your stuff yet, feel free to place them in one of these open slots in here. Yeah.